Thank you so much for having us, first off. So just want to start off with, I know you play football for Baltimore City College, and you played football in Memorial Stadium for your state championship game, and you won a state championship game in Memorial Stadium. What was that experience like? What did it mean to get to play in Memorial Stadium?
Well, I grew up in Baltimore and loved the sports teams there and didn't realize I'd have an opportunity to actually play in Memorial Stadium. But our high school was right across the street from the stadium. It was called the Baltimore City College High School, third oldest public high school in the country. And we had a great football team. And my junior year in high school, I was 16 years old, and we played our final game against our arch rival, and that was for the Maryland Scholastic Association championship game. We played in Memorial Stadium, and it was just a thrill for a high school student because we had a professional team, the Baltimore Colts, before they moved to Indianapolis, played there, and the Baltimore Colts players were our idols. And so to be able to go into the stadium, to walk in their locker room, to see where your heroes actually dressed and showered, it was a lot of fun. And then to go out on the field, you can imagine we had, for that particular year, 30,000 fans came to see that game, and we won. I should note that my coach, high school coach, was a man named George Young, who eventually left City College High School and became the general manager of New York Giants, and was the general manager at the time that they were a Super Bowl winner. So Memorial Stadium has there are a lot of great memories for me, not only going there to watch games, but the thrill of actually playing on that field when I was 16 was a thrill of a life.
Did you have any specific Colts players that you looked up to?
Oh, I love the Baltimore Colt players because at the time most of them lived either in the city or in the metropolitan area. So you actually got to run into some of the players. There was one guy in particular named Jim Parker, who was an offensive tackle who lived just 3 blocks away from me. So I would find ways to casually walk by his house from time to time just to see if I could get a glimpse of him. So he was one of the guys that I really admired, and also a running back named Lenny Moore, also lived in the city. Exciting runner, one of the great running backs in the history of the game. So he too was among my heroes.
Well, just what was it like living so close to the stadium? Were you able to hear game day from your house? Were you able to?
Oh no. In terms of my interaction with the stadium growing up, my father was a great football fan, and so we would go to the games. So you can imagine now, you've got to really turn your mind back historically, but I was able to get a ticket to the game for $2. So now I was sitting in the bleachers. I mean, it was the nosebleed seats, but I was able to go. So every home game, and when I was a high school student, I got to see a professional football game. My father would sit in very nice seats, and I would sit in the bleachers for my $2. But yeah, Memorial Stadium was a real part of my experience in growing up, and then of course I got to play on the field. So so the stadium was close to my high school, but not close to my house. But every weekend that the Colts played, I was there.
So moving forward in time here, when the Colts left,
Right.
in the middle of the night, how did that impact how the city viewed the future of the Orioles and just sports in the city of Baltimore.
When the Colts left Baltimore, I was an elected official. I was the state's attorney at the time. And I've been trying to think of a word that's similar to trauma. But the city wasn't really traumatized, but there was something close to that. People were truly upset. They were shocked, they were surprised, and it was not only sports fans. There was a sense of something that affected the identity of the community was all of a sudden taken away, and taken away in a very unsettling manner. And our mayor at the time kind of voiced the frustration of the community in his own inimitable way. And basically, we were kind of crushed by, temporarily. But it did refocus city fathers, both the business community and the elected officials, on retaining the Baltimore Orioles. And there was a real concern after the Major League Football team left that the Major League Baseball team might also leave. And so that began a whole series of activities to try to keep the Baltimore Orioles in the city.
So my next question, correct me if I'm wrong, when you were running for mayor, you originally said that you actually were not opposed to having a ballpark outside the city,
That's correct.
but then you changed your mind. What led you to change your mind?
Sure. When I was a candidate for mayor, I was looking around at some of the cities that had recently built ballparks, and I was impressed with the Kansas City. I had visited there, and I saw the Kauffman Stadium and Arrowhead Stadium, and they were right outside the city limits of Kansas City, and I was kind of impressed that they had football and baseball nearby. So I thought that made a lot of sense. Also, I knew that the bulk of the fans for the sports team actually came from the metropolitan area. So I thought, maybe that made sense. And what I didn't appreciate was the vision that the governor had of how a downtown stadium would have spillover economic impact on the surrounding area. After thinking about it for a while and talking to those who were involved with planning the stadium, I said, I got it. Light bulb finally went off, and then I said my ideas about the Kansas City complex wouldn't work for Baltimore. Downtown made sense.
So you said the bulk of the fans were from the metropolitan area. Was that like census, like data, or like? Because that's actually interesting. How did you figure that part
No,
out?
I knew from data that, now understand, because Baltimore City was losing population, and that had occurred since World War II, and mainly because of the development of the interstate highway system, that the bulk of the people that used to live in the city actually lived within 5 miles of the city limit. But it was just easy getting in and out. But data showed that in terms of the fan base, that you had a strong base in the city, but the bulk of the fans actually lived in the metropolitan area.
And how do you think Camden Yards has impacted Baltimore's just culture, the downtown area, all that? What do you think that impact is?
Camden Yards is just a source of pride for Baltimore City and for the whole region. People were excited about the architecture, that you had both a modern look and a historical look married together. that it was going to help to retain the Orioles, which, again, a source of pride. And the fact that so many other cities developed stadiums following that model, it was like, for our community, we could say we were the leaders in helping to rejuvenate Major League Baseball around the country. And it was because of Oriole Park at Camden Yards.
So I have a quote to read to you. So this is like about opening day, and
I know that quote.
so you said, "I was worried that we hadn't done everything we could to plan to get people in and out of the ballpark.
Right.
All I could think was about that headline in the newspaper. The next day was going to say Schaefer Stadium smokes traffic."
Absolutely.
What did you mean by that?
No, I was very concerned when on the stadium, Oriole Park at Camden Yards, was developed, that we were going to have all the best planning in the world, that folks were going to love the stadium, and the one area that was going to be a problem was getting in and out of the community. And so Schaefer would get the praise for the beautiful stadium, and Schmoke would get the criticism for the traffic. So I was just preparing myself and getting ahead of any criticism that might come my way. But I knew that people were going to love the stadium, and I'll tell you just one quick story. Larry Lucchino, who was then with the Orioles in top management, invited people to come to the stadium about a week before it opened, just to bring their brown bags. You come sit anywhere in the stadium. And so it was around lunchtime, and I walked on the field with Lucchino. We were walking down the first base line, and this guy who was sitting in right behind the Orioles dugout there hollered. He said, "Hey, Mayor, glad to see government can do something right." And it was just a wonderful moment, but I could just tell from the people that they loved that stadium, and it was going to be a big hit.
Were you in contact with the governor's office or any legislators' aides going into opening day to plan out like traffic, having traffic cops, parking? Were there any discussions?
Well, I'm glad you used the term governor's office rather than governor. We had officials, aides, that talked about this. His transportation guy, my public works guy, talked about it, and we did as best we could.
So was the majority of the conversation between cabinet meetings of the city officials then?
The meetings about the stadium were, it wasn't a whole group of people together, it was small groups of people, yeah.
So when you first met the Orioles brass and guys like Larry Lucchino,
Yeah.
how far along were they into the Camden Yards project?
Well, most of the early planning was with Governor Schaefer and his staff. So they were pretty far along. Janet Marie Smith came in to give me a schematic. The architect, I'm sorry, gave me a schematic of this stadium. And then the governor's Secretary of Transportation came in to talk to me about a light rail line that would go there. They needed our permission to do that. And the governor's, I can't remember whether it was somebody on his staff or a cabinet official, talked about us giving up some land for the beauty of the whole project. From my point of view as a mayor, was that we didn't have to raise taxes, and that was the biggest hurdle that other cities had to overcome. A lot of criticism about raising taxes on people to benefit baseball team owners. We didn't have to do that, but we did have to have conversation about giving up some land and some infrastructure near the stadium, under pipes and stuff under that had to be moved. But most of that was done staff to staff. Yeah.
So going back to like that economic development question, are you satisfied with what Camden Yards has brought to the city?
We had a lot of debate about the economic impact of having a stadium or professional sports. And if you just look at it from a pure profit loss or dollars and cents, baseball stadiums make more sense than a football stadium because you only have, 10 games. But for us, the Camden Yards had a substantial impact on our community, both from an economic point of view and a morale point of view. Lifted the spirits, and it did contribute economically to Baltimore. And the critics of the stadium before it was built were muted after the stadium was built, and particularly after we hosted the All-Star game in 1994, I believe. People fell in love with it. People said it made a lot of sense. And it was not a drain on the city. It really contributed economically.
And so, did you ever get to meet Edward Bennett Williams? Like,
Yeah,
I know when
sure.
he became mayor, he was very sick in 1980 because he passed away in 1987.
Yeah.
And if you did, what was he like?
I met Edward Bennett Williams before sports, because before I was a recovering politician, I was a recovering lawyer, and I was an assistant U.S. attorney, and we had cases involving his firm, and that's where I first met him. My interaction with Orioles management was primarily Larry Lucchino, and then when Eli Jacobs took over, I interacted with him. Didn't have much interaction with Williams as an owner, but more as a lawyer. He was a sharp, smart man. He was a brilliant tactician, and it was kind of an honor to be in his presence as a lawyer. He was someone that was really admired by professional practitioners.
And then, sort of next owner, Eli Jacobs. What was interacting with him?
Well, Eli Jacobs was very different. You never got a sense that of a real commitment to the city. I mean, he was really committed to the team. But it was during his time that they took the word Baltimore off of Orioles and just had Orioles. And that started people wondering, are they going to move? Is this a step towards that? So the community never really warmed up to him, and I never got a sense that he warmed up to us in the way that prior owners did.
Yeah. So actually.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
So this maybe when you're in the state's attorney, how worried were you that Edward Bennett Williams, would move? How worried were you about the possibility that he would move the team outside of Baltimore?
I think all the elected officials in the business community were concerned, and Williams started to make comments about a new stadium. And again, initial phase, there was a lot of opposition. People were saying, wait a minute, Memorial Stadium's great, can't you renovate it? It's heart and soul of the city, it's in the neighborhoods, so there was a lot of criticism when Williams first raised the idea of needing a new stadium. But then when Schaefer said he was committed to doing it, some of the criticism started lessening, but the big controversy became location, and that's why I was on the side of the suburban location. He was on the side of downtown, and he won.
So there was some stadium opposition, like being built in Canyon Yards.
Yes.
Did you have to deal with that with like complaints from people in the city? Was that ever something that you'd have to?
Well, there's a neighborhood nearby, but again, now I'm just going from memory's haze, but what I recall mostly about the neighbors was parking issues once the stadium was built, as opposed to their opposition to having it there. One of the big fights had to do with whether the warehouse that's in the outfield of Camden, was that going to be preserved or not? And there was very strong feelings about that. Of course, the architect, took care of that in her design. So criticism diminished.
So we know that this was a state project and a legacy of Governor Schaefer.
Yeah.
And that Schaefer didn't really have the greatest reputation with working well with others. Were you involved in?
I don't know how you get that reaction in Jonah, but that was a master of understatement there.
Were you involved in the creation of the Canyon Yards the way you wanted to be?
That's a good question. Once I became convinced that the downtown location was the best location, my view was, let me be as supportive as possible as long as we don't have to raise taxes. So if I had been in a situation where it was a state project, but the citizens of the city had to pay for it, I would have had a different reaction. But no, I wanted to be a partner, complementary in that effort, because it was pretty far down the line by the time I became a mayor in 1987. But no, I didn't want to be involved with the design or anything like that. And I recognized that once the project opened, that it was, credit was going to go to the governor for, keeping the team here and bringing about a beautiful facility.
Was raising taxes ever a discussion with,
No, that was, the issue that came up was, I was concerned about was, well, how much are you going to ask the citizens, the residents of Baltimore to pay for it? And when the decision was made, we're not asking to raise taxes, all that we want is some land that you would donate, the city would donate some land and infrastructure near the site that would become Oriole Park. And I was pleased with that, and I never got any criticism from the community for that decision.
And just once again, I know that Schaefer was really challenging to work with, but because of your two jobs being just closely tied together, being the mayor of Baltimore and being the governor of Maryland, was there really any communication? Like, what was the communication like between your two groups?
What I decided to do, recognizing that the governor and I weren't going to go to lunch together every day. I asked a person who was a good friend of mine and an even better friend of the governor's to serve as an intermediary. He was a former circuit court judge who had run for office with Schaefer, and they were very, very close personal friends. And this former judge saw a way of assisting communications, and so I would tell him what I needed from the governor. He would translate, take that to the governor. The governor would send a message back to me, and that's how things worked for 5 years.
So I don't know if you've seen these pictures, but there's some pictures of you, and it's kind of small, but there's pictures of you and Schaefer together, like at Canyon Yards.
Right.
But in them, you guys are. It's just they're pretty funny pictures. 'Cause you're also never talking to each other. In the pictures.
That's pictures worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. So moving on to opening day. So when you first saw Canyon Yards being built a week earlier, what was your first impression of the stadium?
I was so impressed by, I had seen the designs, I'd seen drawings, but to see the thing actually get built, it was truly amazing. And I knew that it was something that the whole community was going to be proud of. But then after the first game, I started to think about Memorial Stadium and what we were going to do with that in the future. And I had, again, experience of visiting another city, and that was Philadelphia. And Philadelphia had built new stadiums, and the old stadium's called Connie Mack Stadium, was sitting right in the middle of a neighborhood. And so we had some similarities to, because Memorial Stadium was in a really nice neighborhood of our city. But what happened in Philadelphia was that they allowed Connie Mack Stadium to kind of deteriorate and just rot in the neighborhood, bringing down the whole neighborhood. And I didn't want that to happen with Memorial Stadium. So again, we got into a little tug of war politically about the future of Memorial Stadium. And we ended up with a nice decision of tearing it down and building a intergenerational project there, and also having Johns Hopkins University with a major facility right across the street from the old Memorial Stadium.
What were you specifically doing on opening day?
Opening day of Camden Yards, I was walking around the exterior because I was looking at traffic. You got to understand, being mayor is pretty basic stuff. It's so I was looking, how was traffic moving? Did we have enough security there? And then I went inside, I don't even remember much about the game. I remember more about the operation of the facility and how pleased I was that the headline did not read what I thought it was going to read. So things went well.
Were there any points where you were like, oh my God, this is the amount of traffic, I'm gonna go crazy?
No, I was so pleased that things went well that first day, because what I didn't anticipate was how many people were going to come in so early. So we didn't have this bottleneck right at the beginning. People wanted to see it. So they got there early, and things went well.
What do you think of Utah Street kind of shaping the stadium and having restaurants and businesses right there, and just being a natural thoroughfare to the stadium?
Well, it's interesting. It's taken a while for the impact to flow as far away from the stadium as I had hoped. Close to the stadium, you see more economic impact. The current owners of the Orioles now are thinking more about developing an economic plan similar to what Atlanta has done, which would bring a lot more life and economic life to the community. But it is still a marvel for me, something that we are all very proud of.
And do you remember where you were sitting in the stadium for opening day by chance?
Yeah, the Orioles decided that they would give a skybox to the city and to the state, and they made sure that we were not next to one another. So yes, I remember we had a box along the third base line, and the governor's was along the first base line.
And what's your, how to phrase this? What's your takeaway of what came, like, let me rephrase this. How do you think Camden Yards can be like, how do you think Camden Yards will be viewed like 40 years from now? Like, what do you think far
Yeah,
into the future, what is
That's
Camden
interesting you
Yards?
share. You know, the life of the city, it has its ups and downs. And since World War II, there have been a number of significant moments in the life of Baltimore that have had a real impact over time. The development of our Inner Harbor area, and with the Science Center and the National Aquarium there, big impact. Camden Yards also, it's just a symbol of an important moment in the history of the city that helped to revive spirits of the community, and also became something that everybody took a great deal of pride in. There are other moments there that were more depressing in the life of the city, but in terms of those developments, both the architecture, the economic impact, they had tremendous impact on the city. And so I think Camden Yards is, Oriole Park at Camden Yards is one of those developments that people will have pride in because it have a multi-generational impact. There were young people back in the 90s that were going to the game. They now adults, grandparents, and they can talk about the development of the stadium, and young people then have their own experience. So it's had a multi-generational impact and really improved the quality of life in Baltimore.